The first letter showed up 2 weeks after I moved in. I just finished stacking the last of my winter firewood outside the mountain cabin I'd bought cash, no mortgage. No nonsense when I saw the envelope taped to my door. Glossy paper, gold lettering, real formal. It read, Mountain Pines HOA notice of snow removal dues, $460. I actually laughed out loud. I'm Oscar Velen, a 52-year-old woodworker who grew up on a ranch in Idaho. I don't scare easy, and I sure as hell don't pay for things I do myself. My cabin sits at the highest point of a private road that I personally cleared with a plow attachment on my truck. I even fixed the potholes last fall because no one else would. I didn't move here to play politics with a bunch of clipboard tyrants. The next morning, I drove down to the so-called HOA office, a converted garage with a crooked sign, and knocked. The door flew open like she'd been waiting. There she was. Platinum blonde bob, pink sweater set, and that permanent squint of judgment. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice sharp enough to cut lumber. "You must be Paula Henders," I said, reading the name from the letter. "I'm here about this snow removal fee. You've got the wrong guy." She crossed her arms. "No, Mr. Velen, you're within the HOA boundary. Everyone pays. It's in the community charter." I read the charter. "My property's off-grid, not connected to your water, sewer, or roads. I paved mine myself and have the receipts. You've never plowed my section." She sniffed. "Well, as a member of this community, you benefit from the cleared roads below your driveway. That's what the fee covers." "No," I said calmly. "I clear those too. I plow all the way down to the county line. You've never touched them." She opened her mouth, then shut it. "You're welcome, by the way," I added, turning to leave. 2 days later, I got another notice. This one had the word delinquent stamped across it in red. They'd tacked on a $50 late fee. They wanted a fight. Fine. I installed cameras at the base of my road and started keeping a snow log, dates, times, photos of my cleared path, and timestamps from my truck's dashcam. I even filmed the untouched roads below mine, snowed in and undisturbed. A week later, Paula showed up at my property uninvited during a storm, holding a clipboard like it was a badge. "You can't record people without permission," she snapped, glaring at the camera mounted to my porch. "Actually, I can," I said. "Private property." "You're trespassing?" "I'm here for an inspection," she said, stepping forward. "No, you're not," I said, blocking her. "You're violating state law. I've already spoken to the sheriff." She scoffed, turned, and stomped back through 6 inches of snow on the road she claimed the HOA maintained. I had everything I needed, and I wasn't done. The sheriff's deputy showed up 5 days after Paula's unauthorized visit. I was stacking reclaimed cedar in the back when I heard tires crunching over gravel. Deputy Lang climbed out of his cruiser, adjusting his belt and eyeing the new camera I'd installed at the gate. He wasn't new to the area, big guy, late 40s, beard like a mountain preacher, but we'd never spoken before. He didn't look irritated, just determined. "You Oscar Velen?" he asked. "That's me," I said, wiping my hands on a rag. He nodded toward the cabin. "Mind if I come up? Got a few questions about a trespassing complaint." I led him onto the porch, offered him a seat I'd built from old barnwood, and poured him a mug of hot coffee from the thermos I kept near the door. He took it without hesitation. "Appreciate that," he said. "So here's the thing. Paula Henders filed a report, claims you obstructed her during a routine HOA inspection and threatened her with surveillance." I chuckled. "And I'm guessing she left out the part where she hiked up my private road without notice or permission." Lang took a sip and pulled out a small notepad. "There's no record of her requesting access through the county. Far as I know, your property isn't listed under the HOA's jurisdiction." "It's not," I said. "Want to see why?" I brought out a thick binder labeled Boundary Survey and Easements. Inside were topographical maps, notarized surveyor reports, and a signed county letter from 7 years ago confirming that my land sat outside HOA control. Lang looked through it slowly, nodding. "Paula's been trying to expand her authority for years," he muttered. Few folks down the ridge already filed complaints. She's just never tangled with someone who documents everything. I brought up the footage from my porch cam. Paula marching up through the storm, clipboard clenched like a weapon. No knock, no call, just her stomping onto my porch like she owned it. Lang watched, jaw tight. She's pushing her luck, he said. You want to press charges? I shook my head. Not yet. But I do want it on record. He made a few notes. Done, and Oscar, keep those cameras rolling. The next week, things got worse. An envelope arrived, this time certified mail. Inside was a letter from a lawyer named Brent C. Mallory, written on thick ivory stock with more legalese than substance. It accused me of benefiting unfairly from the community's shared infrastructure and threatened a civil suit if I didn't pay back arrears, totaling over $800. He cited bylaws I knew didn't apply to my property. But the truly bold part, he included an updated map. My land was now shaded pink, labeled Provisional Inclusion Zone. It wasn't even subtle. I drove straight to the county records office. Margaret, the clerk, had been working there since the 90s and didn't have much patience for nonsense. When I laid the letter and doctored map on her counter, she raised one eyebrow. Provisional what? She said, flipping through the pages. There's no such designation in our zoning code. Didn't think so, I replied. She pulled up the official parcel listing. My land, lot 218B, was still marked as independent. No HOA designations, no pending amendments. Looks like someone's trying to fabricate authority, she said. Want me to flag this? Absolutely, I said. And I'll need a certified copy for court. She printed it on the spot and stamped it with the county seal. Back at the cabin, I called a friend from my Army days, now a land use attorney in Boise. I laid out the whole situation. He asked for digital copies of everything. I sent him the survey records, the video stills, the fake map, and the threatening letter. 2 days later, he called back. You're dealing with more than overreach, he said. That letter was sent under false authority. Mallory's not licensed to practice in this state. I checked. I froze. You're serious? Dead serious. He's licensed in Nevada. His practice was suspended for misrepresenting clients in a land dispute. Paula's using a disbarred lawyer to fake legal threats. I hung up and filed a formal complaint with the State Bar Association. Then I called Deputy Lang. Need you to look into this Mallory guy, I said. He's not licensed here. Lang called back later that night. Already pulled the records, you're right. This guy has no standing in Idaho, and Paula submitted that map as part of a petition to annex your land into HOA jurisdiction. She didn't just fake the map, she tried to pass it off to the county board. I stared at the fire crackling in the hearth. That's forgery. Sure is, Lang said. And if the board had accepted it, she'd have committed fraud against the county. He paused. County prosecutors opening an investigation. You willing to testify? Absolutely. Within a week, subpoenas went out. County investigators interviewed residents up and down the ridge. Turns out I wasn't the only one targeted. 3 other homeowners had received similar letters, 2 elderly couples and a single mother with a disabled son. All of them had ignored the notices, assuming they were junk mail. They weren't. Paula had been quietly building a paper trail, trying to retroactively claim authority over non-member properties by creating a fake unified snow district. The plan: absorb the outliers, hike dues, and use the funds to renovate the HOA clubhouse, which, according to a whistleblower on her board, was also her personal yoga studio. Lang called again after the first round of interviews. She's not just in trouble, he said. She's facing charges. Fraud. Misuse of public documents, possible mail tampering, I exhaled. Good, she needs to answer for this. But Paula wasn't done. One night, just before midnight, I caught movement on my lower trail cam, a pair of headlights creeping uphill with no reason to be there. My other cameras picked up 2 people, 1 male, 1 female sneaking up the slope with bolt cutters. They reached the metal gate I'd installed last summer and tried to snap the chain. They failed. Instead, they triggered the trip alarm I'd wired into the post, which flashed a bright strobe and blasted a siren loud enough to wake the bears. They bolted. I handed the footage to Lang the next morning. "That's her," he said without hesitation. "And the guy, her nephew. Record for petty theft." I reinforced the gate anyway. Steel cable, new locks, motion lights. And I added a third camera, this one hidden inside a hollowed-out tree pointed right at the trail. The very next day, I got an email from the county prosecutor's office. The grand jury was moving forward. Paula Henders was being indicted. 2 weeks after the indictment, the snow began to melt. Not all at once, just enough to reveal the ruts left by Paula's SUV and the bolt cutter tracks halfway up the ridge. The county crime scene techs had already photographed everything, but I left the marks untouched. Let them sit in the sun like scars on the mountain. I figured things would quiet down after the grand jury ruling. But I was wrong. One morning, I opened the mailbox at the base of my road to find it hanging open, the lock tampered with. The door swung on its hinge like a cracked jaw. Inside was a folded notice held together with a rubber band. No envelope, no return address, just a single sheet typed in bold, blocky letters. "You're not welcome here. We know what you did." There was no signature, but the wording wasn't hard to decipher. The intimidation was sloppy, almost desperate. I didn't bother calling Lang this time. I took the note, placed it in a Ziploc, and drove it straight to the county investigator's office in Sandpoint. They'd already opened a case file on Paula's activities. Now they had another piece to add. Detective Marla Chen met me in the hallway outside the evidence room. She wore a canvas field jacket and carried a file stuffed with printed emails and sworn statements. "We've identified at least 6 forged maps," she said without preamble. "All of them submitted by Paula or someone in her HOA board under her direction. The annexation attempt wasn't just targeting you, it was part of what she called Phase 2 in her private notes." I raised an eyebrow. "There's a Phase 1. Chen opened the folder and passed me a photo of a 2-story house down the ridge, the one with blue shutters and a crooked chimney. I'd seen it before while hauling firewood down the trail. Last summer, the HOA filed a lien against that property," she said. "Claimed unpaid fees, even though the owner, a retired firefighter named Glenn Ford, never signed onto the association. Paula backdated a contract and forged his signature." My jaw tightened. "And the county accepted it, temporarily," Chen said, "until Ford hired a real estate attorney and proved the signature was fake. That's what triggered our first red flag." She flipped to another page, a spreadsheet showing HOA fund allocations. One column was labeled miscellaneous maintenance. The numbers ballooned over the last 18 months. Over $50,000 funneled through that line item, Chen said. "We believe she was using it to pay for private contractors, some of whom were relatives, and for renovations on her own property." I leaned back in the chair. "So she wasn't just overreaching, she was embezzling." "Exactly," Chen said. "And we're building a case for wire fraud since some of the payments crossed state lines." She handed me a chain of custody receipt for the threatening note. I signed it, then stood. "Let me know when you need me in court." "We will," she said, "and Oscar, be careful." People like her don't go down quiet. She was right. That night the power went out, not across the mountain, just at my cabin. No wind, no storm, no reason. I checked the breaker box. Every switch was flipped fine. Then I followed the line down the slope with a flashlight, boots sinking into thawing slush. Halfway to the junction box, I found the issue. The main cable had been cut. Clean slice. No chew marks, no fray, just a deliberate sever, the copper ends exposed like veins. I didn't touch it. I took photos, then backed off and called the sheriff's office directly. Lang answered on the first ring. "She's escalating," I said. "Someone cut my main line." "I'll send someone up," he said. "Don't touch anything." 2 deputies arrived within the hour, along with an electrical inspector from the county. They examined the cut, took measurements, and flagged the area with orange tape. Lang showed up last, wearing a thick jacket and a look that said he hadn't slept much. We traced the bolt cutters from the last incident, he said. Found a receipt at a hardware store 2 towns over. Guess who bought them? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Her nephew, he said. Paid cash, but the clerk remembered him. Had the same hoodie on as in your camera footage. He pulled out a small evidence bag and handed it to me. Inside was a plastic keycard bent, slightly melted on one end. Found it near your utility shed, he said. Matches the ones used at the HOA clubhouse. Probably snagged it when they were trying to get in. I stared at it for a moment, then handed it back. Lang looked toward the ridge. We're pulling her entire board in for questioning. One of them flipped this morning. Said Paula kept 2 sets of books, one for the HOA and one she called her strategic ledger. That one's got every manufactured fee, every fake invoice, and a list of properties she planned to coerce into joining. And the board went along with it. Most of them didn't know, Lang said. She kept them in the dark. The ones who did are being charged. I glanced toward the trail. The snow was nearly gone now, revealing the gravel beneath my road. I'd laid it by hand, stone by stone. They think they own this place, I said. But they don't understand what ownership actually means. Lang nodded. They will. The trial date was set for mid-spring, but before that, something unexpected happened. A group of residents from lower down the ridge came to visit. They hiked up together, 6 of them carrying coolers, lawn chairs, and a grill. One brought a case of local beer. Another had venison jerky. They set up in my clearing like it was a tailgate party. I opened the door, confused. The woman in the front stepped forward. She wore hiking boots and a faded college sweatshirt. "You're Oscar?" she asked. "That's me. I'm Dana. We live on Pine Hollow Road. We heard what you did standing up to Paula. We wanted to say thank you. She's been running roughshod over folks down there for years." Most of us were too nervous to push back. "Not anymore," said a man behind her. "We're forming a counter-petition. We want her entire board disbanded." I stepped out onto the porch. "You have my full support," Dana smiled. "We were hoping you'd say that. We also wanted to ask if you'd help us write the filing. Word is, you know your way around documents." I laughed for the first time in weeks. "Bring the paperwork. I'll even throw in firewood." After they left, I sat on the porch and watched the sun dip behind the ridge. The shadows stretched long across the valley. My cameras blinked green one by one. The mountain was quiet again, but not asleep. The courthouse was packed on the morning of Paula's arraignment. Local press had picked up the story: rogue HOA president indicted for fraud, forgery, and attempted annexation. Cameras flashed as she exited the sheriff's cruiser in cuffs, jaw tight, eyes darting. Her lawyer followed behind, trying to shield her from view. Inside, the judge read out the charges. Her voice was steady but sharp. Multiple counts of fraud, criminal trespass, document falsification, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and attempted unlawful annexation of private land. Paula pled not guilty. But then something happened she didn't expect. One of her board members, a soft-spoken man named Edwin Park, stood and handed a folder to the bailiff. It contained a signed confession, copies of the strategic ledger, and a memo Paula had written titled Expansion Plan, Target Properties by Q4. The courtroom went silent as the judge read it aloud. Paula's expression didn't change, but her lawyer leaned forward and whispered something fast. The judge banged the gavel once. "Bail is denied. Defendant will remain in custody." As officers led her out, her eyes found mine. This time she didn't squint, she stared, but I didn't look away. I just stood there, flanked by neighbors who no longer feared her. People who'd found their voice. People who were done being bullied. The mountain didn't belong to her anymore. It never had. The trial was scheduled to last 3 days. It wrapped in 1. By the time the opening statements ended, the prosecution had already entered into evidence over 100 documents. Falsified maps, fabricated contracts, misappropriated financial records, and video of Paula directing her nephew during the late-night trespass attempt. The jury, mostly retired locals and a few younger homesteaders, sat stone-faced. None of them needed convincing, I testified second. The courtroom was heavy with the smell of old wood and fresh printer toner. The defense lawyer tried to rattle me during cross-examination, asking if I had a personal vendetta against the HOA. Not personal, I said. Just principled. He asked if I'd ever threatened Paula. No, I said, but she threatened my property rights. That's not a small thing in these parts. The judge didn't interrupt once. After I stepped down, Glenn Ford took the stand. He brought with him the original survey of his land, notarized and sealed, and compared it to the one Paula's office had submitted altered by hand and then scanned to look official. When asked how he discovered the forgery, he pointed at the date. She wrote the wrong year, he said without hesitation. Claimed I signed this in 2017. My wife passed that summer. I couldn't hold a pen, let alone deal with paperwork. Paula didn't lift her eyes once during his testimony. By noon, the defense was out of steam. They asked for a recess, then returned with a plea deal. Paula would admit to 3 counts of fraud and 1 count of criminal conspiracy in exchange for a reduced sentence. The prosecutor rejected it on the spot. By late afternoon, the jury returned a unanimous verdict on all counts guilty. She was taken out in cuffs, no chance for bail this time. Her nephew had already cut a deal, agreeing to testify in exchange for probation and community service. The rest of the HOA board, save for 2 who had resigned months earlier, were fined and banned from holding any official positions in the county for 5 years. But the real fallout came the next week. The County Board of Supervisors met in a public hearing to address the future of the Mountain Pines HOA. For the first time in its 20-year history, residents packed the room. Folding chairs lined the hallway. A few people stood on milk crates outside to listen through the open windows. Dana spoke first. She laid out a motion co-signed by over 40 homeowners to dissolve the HOA entirely. Not restructure, not reform, end it. She cited the criminal convictions, the fraudulent annexation attempts, and the misuse of community funds. Then she handed in a petition. It had 3 times the required number of signatures. One of the supervisors, a graying man with a voice like a diesel engine, nodded slowly as he flipped through the pages. We don't see many of these go through, he said, but everything lines up. You've met the requirements. Motion accepted. Someone clapped, then a second. Within seconds, the entire chamber rose in applause, the sound echoing through the rafters. The Mountain Pines HOA was officially terminated. Back up at the cabin, the air felt different, lighter. The kind of quiet you don't notice until it's disturbed and then returned. The cameras were still up, but I took down the warning signs. I didn't need them anymore. A few days later, I got a call from the county clerk's office. They wanted to confirm the removal of the HOA designation from the surrounding parcels. I gave my approval, then asked if I could come down and pick up the updated map myself. When I arrived, Margaret handed it to me in a cardboard tube. She didn't say much, just smiled and tapped her index finger against the official seal. The paper was still warm from the printer. On the way home, I stopped by the old clubhouse. It was quiet now. The locks had been changed, the windows shuttered. A county notice was taped to the door. Property under review for public reassignment. I walked around back, where the yoga deck had once stood. The flooring was warped from snow damage. No one had maintained it since Paula's arrest. I stood there for a long while, just watching the trees sway in the wind. Then I turned and left. A week after the dissolution, I organized a neighborhood gathering. Not a meeting, no motions, no minutes, just a potluck and a bonfire. People brought homemade pies, stew, venison chili, and fresh bread still steaming in foil. Someone set up a portable speaker and played old country ballads. Kids chased each other with pine cones. Someone brought a telescope and aimed it at the ridge. After hours of eating and swapping stories, Dana raised a mason jar and tapped it twice with a spoon. "We came here for peace," she said. And for a while it felt like we were losing that. But this, she motioned to the crowd, this is what a community looks like, not rules, not fines. Just people who show up for each other. A round of cheers followed, quiet but firm. Later that night, as the fire burned low and the sky turned silver with stars, Glenn sat beside me, bottle of rye between us. "You know," he said, "you didn't have to fight as hard as you did." "Yes, I did," I said, "because they were counting on no one doing anything." He nodded once, then passed me the bottle. The next morning, I began restoring the old foot trail behind my cabin. It hadn't been used in years, overgrown with brush and half covered by fallen branches. I cleared it slowly, one step at a time, until it opened onto a lookout point I hadn't seen since the first week I'd moved in. From there, the valley stretched wide, blue, and endless. You could see the roofs of the lower cabins, the gravel road winding like a ribbon through the trees. No signs, no gates, just the land as it had always been. I stood there a long time, breathing in the sharp scent of pine and thawed earth. No clipboard, no letters. No one telling me what I owed for a road I built with my own 2 hands. Things weren't perfect. Some disputes still lingered. Not everything could be fixed with a bonfire and a petition. But at least now we had a chance to face those things together, without fear. Without someone claiming authority they never earned. That night, I dismantled the last of the old warning signs and stacked them in the shed. One of them had a message in faded paint: "Private road HOA maintained." I painted over it slowly, careful not to miss a spot. Then, in fresh red letters, I wrote something else. "Private road resident maintained since day one," and that was the truth.